I speak on behalf of the chiefs that belong to these 4 First Nations, Doig River First Nation, Halfway River First Nation, Prophet River First Nation, and West Moberly First Nations. They are signatories to Treaty 8. It's a 100-year-old treaty that was signed with the nations and Canada. Many promises that are unfulfilled. We really feel that they're breaching our treaties. You'd see where Dawson Creek is. That's the Peace River that is flowing into the Lake Athabasca, and then out and up north through the Slave into Great Slave Lake, and then out to the Mackenzie, out into the Arctic Ocean. So what happens with Site C and the 2 previous dams does not just affect my people or the pioneers of that area, it affects everybody downstream. In September, we had a summit in Fort St. John where we invited all the downstream First Nations to come and listen to a presentation. And we had 17 other First Nations from downstream come and join us and sign on to our declaration that we end up bringing down to the Premier and presented it to the government and all the different parties. A little bit about Treaty 8. It is one of 11 numbered treaties across Canada. And it's one of the most comprehensive treaties. Number 8, we saw how the first 7 were going, and our ancestors saw, well, no, we need to do something different. So it became one of the most comprehensive ones. And it covers 3 provinces and a little bit of the Northwest Territories. And there are 8 in British Columbia. McLeod Lake is right at the bottom, and they just adhered several years ago. The original 7 are from Fort Nelson, Prophet River, Doig River, Blueberry, Halfway, West Moberly, and Soto First Nations. And I speak on behalf of the 4 that I just mentioned. This is just to show you that my people have been in this territory for many, many years. Charlie Lake Cave, which is not in the valley, but it's up hill a bit. They found some artifacts there that are 10,500 years old. And so that proves that my people have been there for that long. We always say we've been there for immemorial, right? Forever. The artifacts that you see down in the right-hand corner are artifacts that were actually taken out of the Peace Valley that they plan on flooding. There's over 400 ARC sites that are known today, and they're still doing ARC studies right now, so we're sure that they're going to find more. There's a lot of our ancestors that are buried in that area, our elders tell us, because there was a huge flu epidemic in the 1900s that killed a lot of our people, and they were buried in those areas. And typically, First Nations, because the rivers were our corridors, we settled on the riverbanks, and so we know that there's evidence there, and it's going to be interesting to see if they find any of that. Sometimes, conveniently, they don't. Again, just wanted to make the point again that we are deeply rooted into the area. The Peace River got its name from a Denizah word that's that long that I won't even attempt because it's not my language, I'm Slavey. But it means peace because the 2 fighting tribes used to come in there and they finally decided, well, it's time to stop fighting and let's make peace. So they called the Peace River. And it was also the first area that the newcomers, the Europeans, came and met with my people, where the Hudson Bay posts were set up. And it was an area where we entered into and signed off on treaties. And Chief Atachi, who is the former chief of Doig River First Nation, signed off on their treaty on the banks of the Peace River. And again, it's an area where a lot of our ancestors' remains are. The river, the Peace River, is basically our highway. All the rivers in our territory are our highways. That's the way we moved, and you'll notice that a lot of our communities are named after the rivers. And this is just to show you that not only my people used the river as a highway, but the earliest settlers did too. Industrial development has been rapid since about 1942 when they drilled the first gas well. Since then, it's just been going gung-ho. It's somebody said it's drill, baby, drill, and that's what I like to say about British Columbia. We are the breadbasket for this province. 75% of the revenues that goes into the province's revenues comes out of northeastern British Columbia because we sit right over the Western Sedimentary Basin. Forestry 8 million cubic meters of timber cut every year. Hydroelectric, 2 big dams, as Gwen told you about. Mining is going gung-ho right now. We've got 4 large mines, 6 near to be approved. For those of you that don't know, the government has streamlined their processes so badly that anybody who has a visa and a computer, with a click of a mouse, can buy tenure for a mine in British Columbia. Sad. And we've been fighting it because a lot of those areas that they're clicking on are our people's traditional areas. And then there's a lot of other impacts. There's a lot of referrals that comes from Crown Lands, goes through our front window, or front office, whatever they call themselves now, that one window approach that they have. Everything from wind tenures to, somebody wants to put a trail or they want to do something, so we get a lot of referrals. Okay. This is just to show you again, pre-1950, there was only 17 wells, the first one being in 1942, and you'll see the purple dots. Those are the wells. Gas wells, oil and gas wells. And you'll see that around Fort St. John, Dawson Creek, it used to be called the Peace Block, and that's where they initially started all of their drilling. And Fort Nelson is way up in the north corner there. It's mile 300 on the Alaska Highway for those of you that have taken the Alaska Highway, and that's where my community is. And right now, the Horn River Basin is just north of my community. And then the Cordova shale gas is just over in the corner. And then down below that is the Montney shale gas, and shale gas has got a lot of impacts, uses a lot of water. It's frightening, and this province is just putting on earmuffs and blinders, and they don't want to hear the reports that are coming out of Quebec and down in the States about the devastating effects of shale gas. So 17 wells in 1950. Moving to the next slide. Today, we have almost 27,000 oil and gas wells in Treaty 8 territory, and as much as 32,000. The difference are the wells that were dry, but there's still holes in the ground. There's still the devastating effects of each one of those well pads that they have to build. Each of those well pads, we'll see later what they look like, but they cut more forestry in the oil patch than Ministry of Forest does. There's more pesticide use out in the oil patch than forestry does, because they need to keep their oil pads, their pipeline right-of-ways free and clear. Just keep in mind, when you see all those wells, keep in mind all the associated pipelines, roads, meter stations, compressor stations that go with those. So we're talking about a whole bunch of impacts, not just a well. Don't have any clean water in our territory at all because of the hydrocarbons from the oil and gas industry. The picture up on the top left is what it looks like from the air for seismic lines. And previously they used to use cats to come in there and just cut a straight line that never ever grew back for decades. Now they're starting to change things with people like ourselves yelling and screaming at them. So they're doing avoidance cuts, they're doing hand cuts, they're doing mulchers to go in and cut their seismic lines. The picture on the bottom there is a picture that I took out of Fort St. John, and it wasn't on the normal flight path. For some reason, because of the wind, we had to fly around, and we happened to be flying up around the Ladyfern area. And every one of those little white dots is an oil and gas lease. So Ladyfern was one of those great finds that they had a few years ago, and government just let everybody just go in and just stick all their drill, I could say straws in, and they just sucked it dry in a matter of, I think, was 4 or 5 years, and now it's there's no gas there. In terms of caribou, our elders say that caribou used to be like bugs on the landscape before the 2 previous dams were built. And when the 2 previous dams were built and the 2 reservoirs were built, it cut off their migration routes. And so now we have as little as 11 caribou in the burnt pine herd, which is just north of West Mobley's territory. And you may have heard of a recent case where West Mobley was successful in stopping a big mine, first coal. but they have to sit down with the nation and try and come up with a recovery plan. And it's really funny that the court said, government, First Nation, and industry, you have to sit down and do a recovery plan for Caribou. Well, government says, oh, well, we have one, we already have one. Well, what is it? Well, cull the wolves, and so that was their plan. So West Moberly wasn't satisfied, and so took it back to court, and they were successful. So it's a win for us. This again is just to show you the diagram of the downstream impacts and the nations that are involved, and it flows again into the Athabasca Slave and Great Slave Lake and then out into the ocean. The people, the chiefs that came to our territory last fall to talk about Site C, we met with them for 3 days, and they told us some horrendous stories about how the river beds of the Mackenzie and the Slave have decreased substantially because of W.A.C. Bennett and the Peace Canyon. Okay. You can't, remember how I had the boats going up and down? Well, they used to have paddle wheelers. You can't even do that, even with boats now. Unless you have a jet boat, you can stay on top. You're hitting sand. This is a prize-winning photo by Bill Buffo, I think I said his name right, of the Peace Valley, and I just thought it was a nice one to show that one of the promises that was made in our treaty by the Government of Canada is that we as a people can continue our way of life. We can hunt, trap, fish, and exercise our way of life as if there was no treaty for as long as the sun shone, the grass grew, and the rivers flowed. Well, I can tell you that right now the sun doesn't shine as much anymore. I mean, we used to have some of the biggest oriented strand boards in northeastern BC, and we have all the pollution coming off of the big gas plants. Excuse me, but if anybody's here from Spectra, Spectra is one of the biggest polluters. If you guys saw in the Vancouver Sun about 5 years ago, they were the worst polluters for air emissions. Our grass doesn't grow anymore because of all of the pesticide use, not just in forestry, but in the oil patch. And of course, our rivers aren't flowing as they used to anymore. So, huge breach of our treaty. So this is, I think I said this, that even though we did have a treaty to exercise our way of life, as if there was no treaty, today's picture is very different. And this is a quote by one of our elders from West Moberly who said, I'm hurt, my heart is crying for my great-grandchildren. They're spoiled our trees and our water, and we can't drink the water anymore. My parents who go out to their trap line have to take bottled water with them now. They can't drink water out there anymore. This is just to show you some pictures of what I'm saying. Up on the top left, it's a caribou who is ingesting the soils from a PJ spill. It's a pipeline break that happened 10 years ago. And the government didn't do anything about it. Industry didn't do anything about it. They just thought if we ignored it, it's going to go away. But the members of Doig River First Nation saw it, and the government has put in place this fox in charge of the hen house type policy, where they have to report their infractions. Well, they don't always report what they do. And so Doig River has taken it public. They've invited CTV's camera crews up there and developed a video called Black Blood. It's now just won a national award, and we're hoping that it's going to also now win an international award. But they had to shame government and industry into cleaning up this mess. 11 hectares of oil and gas that just were left there, primarily oil. And because of the chlorine content in the hydrocarbons that creates a man-made mineral lick for the ungulates, they come in and they ingest it and they drink the fluids. The top right hand is a bull moose drinking water from a flare pit. That flare pit was contaminated. Two nations were concerned about, all of our nations are concerned about the moose that we're finding. We're finding abscessed livers. There's green fluids that pour out of them when you cut them open. They don't smell right. And so, they've been complaining about something's going on with the animals out there. Well, industry and government didn't want to talk to us. So 2 nations took it upon themselves to get funding to do a contaminant study. They hired qualified biologists who came in and set up remote cameras at all these sites, and it was done by West Moberly and Soto First Nation. And a lot of the members assisted this biologist, and they found that in the Del Rio area, 75% of the sites that they visited were contaminated, and they exceeded provincial and federal standards. And so the study proved that it is contaminated, a lot of carcinogens, that the animals are ingesting it, because they had pictures of moose, they had pictures of birds, they had pictures of bears, deers coming to these sites and ingesting the waters and soils. And so now we're telling government, okay, see, they are, this is why they're sick. And then we're saying, well, you know, what's the long-term effect? You know, what is it doing to our people? You know, cancer is rampant in our communities right now, and is this why? And again, they're putting on the blinders and don't want to hear it. And so again, we're going to be forced to probably do another study to prove that the contaminated animals that my people are ingesting are affecting our people's health. The duck on the bottom here was a duck that was pulled out of the Pine River when the pipeline broke on the Pine River. There was many fish and wildlife, fowl that actually died because of that pipeline break. So my people are at the edge of a cliff. And in the words of one of our former chiefs, he says, you know, our land and our environment are dying a death of 1,000 cuts. So where are we going to be, you know, a few decades down the road? We're not going to have any place to exercise our rights anymore. This is just a picture to show that my people are still out there doing what they always done on the territory. And I'd like to be able to have my great-grandchildren do the same. I don't want to leave a legacy where, you know, they say, well, why didn't great-great-grandma Liz do anything, you know? And so I'm trying my best to, you know, get the word out and create awareness that our environment is being ruined every day by industry, and it's being sanctioned by this government. This is beautiful, isn't it? That's one part of the Peace Valley. I just wanted to show you, like, these are the valleys that the moose and the deer come down to have their babies in the spring to get away from the wolves and the predators. This is where they come down in the winter to get away from the cold mountains to forage for food. And this is what they plan on flooding out. And I think it's just a travesty. Again, just to show you that my people still rely on the moose and deer in that area. And this is the last land we have, is in the terms of one of our elders. And so, you know, for generations to come, you know, what's going to be there? You know, we'd like to have the same thing there for our great-grandchildren, and it's not going to be there. A lot of our stories and our legends are tied to the land, to specific areas, and there's a lot of areas in the Peace Valley that have stories to them. And how do you tell a story when you can't actually go out and show anybody, or, you know, our children, our great-grandchildren, where those stories come from and what they mean?